Hello, this is Shravan. This is my final video report for the final project of Game 470. So here we go. It's a very simple scene. It's like an outdoor space sort of scene, and as you can see here, there's an evil army of small little bots that have landed on Mars and like thoroughly planned to, set up shop here. You can see that they've got all their massive crates and they came in this huge big ass spaceship over here. In the distance of right there, we have Earth and Mercury, I guess. And you can see that we have these really cool alien probes. So these robots really mean business. They've landed here. So, well, that was the pitch. So coming to really technical features, we've got a skybox up in, and it's not affected by the light. We have a terrain, which is, it's built off of a height map. As you can see, the alien probes are sort of scanning or searching with point lights. So if I sort of just go back here, you can notice about, or you will be able to notice about 3 point lights here. This 1, 2, and the third one should be launched shortly somewhere. And anyway, so in the meantime, there's the third one, and you can see that we have those unit boxes over here. So we found a texture for that, I guess. And so basically, the two spheres over there and this robot army over here are being rendered by the shader color light, and everything else is being rendered by the shader texture light, including the spaceship, those 3 probes over here, and the terrain, of course. The skybox does not receive lighting. Now, I tried to include fog in this, and like both my shaders are equipped to handle fog, but the problem is that I ran into way too many model scaling issues, because even to get these models up on screen, it was quite a like I had to really scale them down, so it was just completely messing up the fog. But the shaders, both of them have they have the option, so the user can set fog if he so desires. So let's get into the code. I'll go really quickly over our over the DX app CPP here. So as was the hope, we can see that the code here is basically now just more for loading the shaders and the textures and the models, and it's not for any of that mucky DX app stuff that we used to do so many, in like the initial weeks of the course. So you can see that we have our textures over here, all of them. We initialize the shaders. So my color shader also has the ability to set point lights, and my texture shader also has the ability to set about 3 point lights. So we have that here. We set the point lights for the texture shader in the update or in the draw, so they move around with the alien probes. We've initialized our skybox and our terrain, and it was mentioned in the description that they should behave as their own graphics objects. So the way that I sort of did that was to create them and actually pass that particular model into a graphics object. So that essentially takes care of its own rendering, and it's the same for the terrain as well, right here. These are our models coming in from the files. There are just 3, but I think they still might be pretty heavy, and I apologize for that. We have our pre-made models. So we have one, the unit box repeated texture, which you saw 4 of, and one sphere, which you saw 2 of, and the probe here is, again, it's one model, but we reuse it so to create 3 instances. Finally, you have the graphics objects over here, and this is pretty straightforward. Setting the texture, setting the model, that's how we initialize them. We set the relevant materials and textures over here, and then the world matrices over here. So like I said earlier, I had to do quite a lot of weird scaling to sort of build this scene to scale. So again, completely messed up the fog. I apologize for that. This is where we're making the probes fly around, and we're also, these are to store the individual point lights. And so yeah, in the draw scene, it's just rendering per shader. So you start off with the shader texture, render the skybox, and then go into the shader texture light, and we just start. So we render the all the objects, so the probe, the Corvette, the crates, and then when you set the shader color, then it's the spheres and it's the bot. So that's like a very short sort of demo going on in over there. Now, as for all of our features, let's start with the basic ones. So we have our model. I'll go straight into the model tools. We have capabilities for all of them. So we have a unit box, and as you can see, we have so everything we have. It's the latest version of standard vertex, and it has the UVs and it has the normals. We have a unit box with a repeated texture, uh, which you saw in the demo, and we also have a unit box with 6 faces textures, as was mentioned. Then we have the same thing for a unit pyramid. Again, you have UVs and you have normals. And finally, we have, of course, this is what you saw as well, we have a unit sphere, again with the UVs and normals. This is all that, something I should have done in week 3 and I didn't. And yeah, but we got it going. So that's for the models. These were the simple ones. Then we sort of go into the skybox, and as has been mentioned like so many times, we make sure that we build the skybox to scale instead of building a unit skybox and then sort of going around later. So again, you can see that we have UVs, we have normals, but we don't really care about the normals because the skybox should not receive lighting, so you just render it with a different texture, with a different shader, I beg your pardon. And we go into the terrain. This was built using the height maps. And you can see that based on the height map image that we get, we calculate the number of vertices and accordingly the number of squares, triangles, and then we figure out how to get the UVs, and how to generate the vertices. This was again quite a long process, but once basically you have the vertices and the triangles, then the next thing to do is to generate the normals. So for that, we had different cases. We had the corners, then we had the edges, and finally all the boxes in between. So the corners were special cases, so normals onto them, getting face normals of just particular faces. The edges were slightly more complicated, and then finally every in-between vertex would have to be the normal of the average normal of its surrounding 6 faces. So we have all of that here, and that's the terrain. So going in from there, we get into the shaders. So we have shader color light and shader texture light, and basically what they do, what each of them does is that, as promised, we have the fog parameters right here. But we can set direction light, point lights, and everything. We have a private struct here to store the material, and here we go. So it's an array of 3 point lights over here, and here's my fog structure that has default values. So in case the user doesn't set fog, there's not going to be any fog. So we have here, so when to set point lights, you pass in a light index, and so you have that over here, and then it just goes and updates that particular light. And then when we send the light data across, we send the data for each of the point lights over there. And the shader texture is similar, but what we can do, the only difference here is that we also attach a particular texture which is point in, which is passed in as a pointer. And yeah, I think that's again pretty straightforward. Finally, in the HLSL, so I'll open the texture light for HLSL. What you do is that here we have the constant buffer holds 3 point lights, and we just loop through all of them and calculate the contribution and then add it to the total light. And then finally we come in here and we add the fog. So the way that my fog parameters are going in is that I have it right here. So there's a struct fog, and it's parsed in always with the light parameters, and there's a similar way of it being arranged right at the end over in the shader class. So you can see that there's fog over here. So that's for our shaders, both of them, and I think that I covered that pretty much. So the last thing that we get to is the graphics objects, and again we have color light and texture light, and so we can see here that all the materials, all the textures, and everything are set now on a per mesh basis. And again, we have a material that holds everything. So here, this is graphics object texture. So we have an array of texture pointers, and everything else is pretty sort of straightforward here. So when we render this, come here, and what you can do is that now you can see that we're rendering on a per mesh basis. So based on the materials, based on the texture of those particular mesh, we render it. And it's the same with our graphics object for color light and texture light. Pretty similar, pretty straightforward. And yeah, I think I've sort of covered all of that. Again, you see that you can set the materials, and you can set the world and all and everything, and it's all happening on a per mesh basis. So we have that going over here. So I think that I've sort of covered everything that we needed to do. So once again, to take you through how we use that in the demo. You can see that we have all our textures, all the models that have to be loaded from the files, all the models that are being pre-made, that are already there. So everything for the unit, for the point lights, like I mentioned before, and the skybox, terrain, and then all the graphics objects that sort of encapsulate all those things. And then also just as a just to demonstrate that we're doing everything on a per mesh basis, the bots, so you can see that the platform is sort of black, but the bots themselves are gray. So that was done just to demo that we are doing everything on a per mesh basis. So I think that is all that I wanted to cover. I think it went by pretty fast, but I think I sort of owe you that, because I really rambled for a lot of my assignments. So, and like I said, it's a pretty simple demo here, but it sort of meets all the requirements that were stated, minus the fog because of those darn scaling issues. So I think that's it. Thank you so much for watching, and I learned a lot in this course. Thank you so much for that as well. And see you in next quarter, maybe a couple of quarters. Have a good one. Bye-bye.